Beneath. Beneath is a 2013 movie. It's about a group of kids who go to a lake to celebrate the end of the school year. Obviously, wildly enjoying the occasion is part of the plan. You know, sex, drugs and rock and roll. But once at the lake they get into an unimaginable situation. A huge fish appears and takes one of their oars, then one of them has the brilliant idea of throwing the other one at it, as if it were a sword, and with that he could kill it, but surprise, they are left without oars and in the middle of a huge lake with a monster lurking to eat them as soon as they touch the water. As a horror parody, Beneath is and is not what it seems. If you have ever seen Jaws or Friday the 13th, you would think that it is a cheap copy of both, and in part you are right, in the cheapness. But the movie's intention is not to present a monster and cause you terror with it as it is a killer shark or an immortal masked thug. In fact, the monster, this enormous fish, is the most secondary of the characters in the film. The intention of the film is to show a scenario from an episode that I don't remember right now, but it is to put a bunch of sensual and kinky schoolboys in a small place, but they don't realize how small they are until the fish appears. So we have the good guy. The intellectual. The girl who knows how to say it so that no one gets offended. And the brothers who are how to say it so that no one gets offended. The director and the scriptwriters want you to simultaneously identify with the horny, pubescent kids who think with their crotch and get irritated by the idea of spending more time trapped with them. The protagonists are usually unbearable, but Beneath remains a strangely personal and reflective generic exercise. At first, it's hard to tell how intentionally satirical Beneath is. The protagonists are unfunny, introduced to us by Zeke, a geeky aspiring filmmaker who thinks he's going to be the next great Spielberg or Scorsese. Zeke is and isn't a running joke. He mischievously introduces us to all of his frenemies, including Matt, an athlete who stopped short of being a football star, and Kitty, a flirtatious human prop who has slept with almost everyone on the ship, including best friend Deborah. Zeke is a caricature of the self-serving, camera-wielding ciphers who film everything in contemporary horror movies. He's the least sympathetic character because he treats his friends like film subjects. But once the movie's monstrous catfish appears, it's clear that the movie's creators aren't just playing with the protagonists, they also want to get on the viewer's nerves. In other words, they want to drive them to the point of greatest tension, boredom with the nonsense of the boat's crew. The intention is to frustrate the viewer with so much nonsense from the schoolboys, which they succeed in doing, because even before the climax you're very, very angry with everyone there in the movie. The catfish are almost unimportant to the film's main drama. The film's human characters pose the biggest threat to themselves. The group's camaraderie develops a little more with each scene as they sacrifice themselves for the greater good. The arguments its protagonists have aren't about race or class inequality, but about who screwed who. Still, the film's creators manage to make these desperate outbursts make sense. These lines are spoken by young characters, after all, and the film's actors make the most of that. Newman's performance is oddly believable because Fessenden wants you to believe that Zeke is mean-spirited enough. So even when he speaks in clichés, Zeke only reveals how desperate he is. These kids are ugly, but they're believable, even when Zeke laughs. Row. Row for your life, ha ha ha. While the film's characters sometimes get in their own way, the scenes in which they make brutal, utilitarian choices are tense. And when the film turns violent, you can tell it was directed by someone who cared enough to make you uncomfortable. It might be Fessenden's most accessible film. There's a lot of frustration on screen, but only because Fessenden once again insists that there's a lot more to horror movies than banal characterizations and programmatic scares. Ultimately, Beneath is better than your average Roger Corman clone because it's more earnest than trivial. In conclusion, this movie is not a horror movie, nor a thriller, it is rather a test of your nerves and your patience, but mind you, I don't mean that in a bad way, it's just that it puts you to the test. You end up so frustrated that the climax, when the old man appears and prevents the last survivor from leaving the lake, so that the fish can eat him, is probably something you'll like. And you don't blame him, because what he says is true. The young indigenous was a good boy and they took advantage of his kindness and killed him unnecessarily, or rather stupidly, because otherwise everyone would have been saved, except the first girl who did have the bad fortune of bleeding to death. The moral at the end could be that good deeds are repaid with evil. But above all, no matter how intelligent the person is, or how athletic, or how outgoing and cool, or how beautiful and sexy, or how innocent, when they are together in a confined place, the worst of them will always come out. This is why the film is more similar to Lord of the Flies, which tells how wild and destructive well-educated children can be without any previously instilled evil. Everything will come out naturally. It is part of being human, just like blood itself. Just imagine being there with them. Would you remember that you were the smartest, or that you were the most beautiful, or that you were the most sensible? I don't think so. Survival would prevail over everything. But this scenario is perhaps very unlikely. Imagine yourself in a subway, and there's a fire. How would you act? I'll leave everything for your analysis. That's all for today. Bye.